Hello, I'm Jimmie T. Smith, and I'm the Florida Coalition's Director for the Concerned Veterans for America. And this is On Target. Today, I'm blessed to have a friend of mine, a wonderful leader, Congressman Darren Soto, who's going to discuss with us the John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Improvement Act. This piece of legislation is a bipartisan piece of legislation that we in CVA supported and that we're very proud to have seen signed into legislation last year. One of the key points is that the Congress quite often doesn't get seen as working in a bipartisan fashion, and this legislation truly is bipartisan. So with that, I'd like to take the time to allow the congressman to go ahead and discuss this legislation and potentially talk about some things that he's working on that's bipartisan in the future for veterans issues. Congressman, again, welcome and thank you very much for being part of this.
Well, thanks, Jimmie, for having me. We know that both parties care deeply about veterans. Not only do we need to make sure that we are protecting our servicemen and women, but that we are doing what we can to honor them and provide the support that they need after the battlefield is won and after service is over. We know that our veterans face a lot of challenges. First, I want to talk briefly about Mr. John Scott Hannon, for whom this major piece of bipartisan legislation is named after. He was a 23-year U.S. Navy member of the Navy SEALs. I think you, more than anybody, have an understanding of the kind of training it takes for some of these elite forces like the Navy SEALs, among others, Army Rangers and others of the sort. It is some of the most elite and most difficult training, and they're tasked with doing some of the most difficult missions, like with the killing of Osama bin Laden by our Navy SEAL Team 6, as so many people know. But they face a lot of challenges, obviously, from coming home from the battlefield. And unfortunately, in February of 2018, Mr. John Scott Harmon took his life in suicide. And we know, and it's important to define the problem. In the 2019 National Veterans Suicide Prevention Annual Report, we saw, and the numbers I have are from 2017, 6,139 veterans died from suicide. That is an absolute disgrace. I think we all understand that. And we hear these numbers that most people take to heart, a few people may be numb by, but we can't be. We have to come up with solutions. And that's where Senate Bill 785 comes from. We know that of those veterans who committed suicide, more than 60% of those veterans had no encounter with the Veterans Health Administration, with the VA in 2016 or 2017. So we know there's not only an issue of getting mental health services to our veterans, particularly those who faced combat and serious situations that would result in post-traumatic stress disorder. But we know we need to make sure that we have more interactions between our veterans and our VA. So this bill set about to do a few things that are really important. First, multiple grants from 2021 through 2025 of $174 million annually for nonprofits and telehealth services for suicide prevention. Secondly, as much as $750,000 per grantee. Eligible grantees would include community-based groups, private institutions, state and local governments, and American Indian tribes. And it's set to expire 3 years after the first grant. So we know this is kind of like a pilot that after 3 years we'll have to retool or keep as is, depending on the results. The grant funds could be used to purchase and upgrade telehealth and hardware and software. Remember, we talked about it's part making sure we have enough health counselors, and it's part access. And we know as we're expanding telehealth, in fact, COVID-19 required us to expand it quite a bit in Medicare and in Medicaid on the federal level for all patients, that there's a lot of areas of care where telehealth can do the trick, or at least better than not having any care at all. In psychological services, mental health services are some of those. We're also ensuring that there's one suicide prevention coordinator at every VA medical center. That's really critical as well. So it's that getting more health professionals and getting better access. And you're seeing that continual theme. Offering scholarships to students in relevant fields who agree to work at as a VA counselor for 6 years. So we're tackling two major issues there. One, creating that talent pipeline, and two, a lot of these healthcare professionals come out with a lot of student loans. So this is combining two key issues. And also increasing the use of animal service dogs, sports, and other alternative therapies. It's a 3-year pilot program to provide eligible veterans to treat their post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety. And the last major piece is for women veterans, the VA would add a text messaging function to its Women Veterans Call Center. This was passed out of the House in September and shortly after passed by both the Senate and signed into law by President Trump. And it has some incredible support from the VA, from Iraq and Afghanistan, Veterans of America, the National Alliance on Mental Health Illness, and Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW for the United States. So, we know this is a huge issue, and Congress has come together with real money, with real efforts to increase healthcare professionals, and real efforts to make sure that we're creating greater access. And we'll be watching closely. It's unacceptable for one veteran across this country to be committing suicide because they didn't have the proper help. We didn't outreach to them, and we're getting serious about this. And so I'm proud of this key piece of legislation. Obviously, a lot of it went through our VA committee. I serve on Energy and Commerce and Natural Resources, so it didn't go through the committees that I sit on. But we have the Orlando VA in our district, and we regularly meet with constituents pre-COVID, and had a office there for about 2 years. Which goes into the last thing I want to talk about briefly, and then we'll go into discussion with any questions you may have, is that Brian Mast, my colleague from the Treasure Coast, from the Palm Beach, Martin, and St. Lucie County area, made history, and he's, as you may know, a disabled combat veteran and lost both his legs below the knee and his thumb serving in combat. And he got the first VA hospital congressional office. And as soon as I found out he got one, I sought about to get my own office. And it turns out that the GSA only meets twice a year. People get frustrated by government, right? Twice a year they only meet. So he got his in January, and I had to wait till August to get mine. But some politics came about, and it's not partisan politics. It's more a general aversion to oversight. Brian, 2 years later, got his office eliminated, and then I got mine eliminated. We put together a bill to give a legal right for members of Congress, and we share them. We don't just have one office for one of us. We share them with other members in the region to be able to be authorized to have an office in the VA. I have a feeling we're going to get that back soon anyway, but it's bipartisan legislation that Congressman Mast and I and multiple Democrats and Republicans have come together. It seems like no matter which president is in office, they always try to push away that congressional oversight. And, we view ourselves as collaborators. Our local VA executive director, Tim Cook, and our local doctors and nurses and a lot of the folks who are healthcare professionals there, they were actually very supportive of having the office there. So we have great buy-in on the local level, but we had some DC shenanigans going on that resulted in all the offices being terminated, Brian and mine included. So that's another piece of legislation that we're working on, knowing that if you have an issue at the VA, you could go right to your member of Congress's office and ask for a second look. So these are some of the major things we're working on, and I look forward to some of your questions, Jimmie, and thanks for having me.
Well, again, thank you very much. One of the key things, Congressman, is you're demonstrating by the last part of what you talked about, how both parties really do believe in serving those who have served to defend our freedoms and prosperities. So I greatly appreciate that. And I hope that legislation does move forward and you guys are successful. Some of the key things that you talked about was the aspect of the grant processes. And I think that's an important thing to really harp on, because what I find in Florida and dealing with others is that there's so much goodwill towards trying to do well for veterans that we find it's probably best done, a lot of it, in the community of not-for-profits. They tend to just have better connections and better resources, and they're more ingrained into the community in a way that really does benefit veterans. And I was wondering, are these grants to be something that any organization can apply for? Do they have to be a veteran-specific organization, or can it be a organization that deals with mental health regardless of veteran status?
So when we're talking about 170 million over the entire VA system, it's going to be competitive, obviously, right? And so all those would be factors in your competitiveness. One would think a veterans nonprofit organization, and they also said local governments are eligible as well, would be the most competitive. I would imagine having that health care component, that mental health component already in their mission and among their expertise would also be a key part. Is that a requirement? No. But with these being very competitive, I'd imagine it would be those with that background that would have the best chance to get the grant. But anyone with a nonprofit, an NGO, should be able to apply. I know that a lot of times you have to register with the federal government to do that. So there is definitely some paperwork. There's always paperwork when it comes to the federal government, but there's no requirement that you'd have to have those areas. But you definitely want to be able to make the case that you could handle this very sensitive set of mental health services when we're talking about suicide prevention among our veterans.
But, another thing to bring up, and thank you very much for that information. You pointed out the issue of service animals. So we know that you were able to vote in favor in Florida for service animals to be able to have access within businesses and restaurants and things like that. And as part of that effort, do you think that these programs are going to be able to be properly tracked? Because we know for a fact from legislation that Florida did that was presented that it does help. We have veterans who stepped away from using opioids and things like that, able to now have a service animal to deal with whatever. Do you think that this aspect is still going to have the challenges that we saw in Florida being done in the other states as well? So we know Florida, we've started on that movement towards working for it. I would love to see the VA come in and support service animals for veterans. But nationwide, do you think that there's going to be a challenge like we faced in Florida, where people are uncomfortable with recognizing the fact that a service animal is actually a piece of medical equipment by law, and that they have the access unrestricted because it is a piece of equipment? We found in Florida, as I'm sure you remember, that people basically saw them as dogs no matter what we said. And it took a lot of time to change, but we're now seeing signs everywhere: service animals only, no pets, and things like that. That's now giving respectability to service animals. So again, do you feel that the challenges that we faced in Florida can be overcome in these other states that have not gone and had the fight we have?
Sure. With issues like this, it's best to start with the science. We know there's a wealth of work done on the fact that service animals work. Perhaps not with every type of mental health issue, but definitely if prescribed by a doctor after reviewing a patient's medical history and making those medically necessary decisions. I don't need any further evidence. I don't think the VA needs any further evidence that service dogs, when properly prescribed, can help with mental health issues. From there, I think you're getting a growing understanding of that. You mentioned yourself the signs of service animals only. There's a recognition of that, but this is about when it's medically necessary and prescribed by a doctor. It absolutely should be protected. And when we talk about 6,700 veterans dying in 2017. And if it's going to take people being able to bring service dogs along to save any life of a veteran, let alone potentially hundreds or thousands, it's something that society needs to get with.
One of the things about the legislation I also thought was important is that they're actually going to start tracking the science of effective programs for the prevention of mental health. So the VA has a lot of different programs, but it's uncommon to actually look at what they're doing and say, okay, well, let's look at what's really working and what's not. And the different organizations or entities of government are now going to study what's really working and what's not working. That's really uncommon in government.
Well, we see there's a 3-year pilot program for a lot of these, and it's funded until 2025 in the grant program. So it gives us time to be able to analyze this. Make no mistake about it, this is a huge challenge. A lot of folks, when they come back from combat, face serious mental health issues because they've seen things that few members of the public have ever seen. Perhaps maybe first responders, the kind of trauma from the kind of gruesome things that you may see in war. War is hell, we know that. These are folks who've stepped up to serve our country and defend our freedoms, and they've had to go through things that your average member of the public couldn't even fathom. And so it's really important that we understand how tough of a challenge this is and how resolute we have to be in trying every option, reviewing the data, and adjusting where we can, because it is a failure of our nation to have thousands of veterans come home and commit suicide. It also reminds us that we always have to be welcoming in many different areas of society for veterans, from hiring, incentives, in encouraging hiring, to marital counseling, to allowing for that free care at the VA, GI benefits to improve education and skill sets, the VA loans for mortgages. All these things together create a holistic approach to trying to integrate veterans back into society, and it takes a while, right? And it also is just a society as a whole welcoming back troops. We saw in much of our history that we did that, but we saw some periods of time like the Vietnam era where it was the exact opposite, and that had a compounding traumatic effect on some of those veterans. One of the things that we regularly do is when President Barack Obama and now President Donald J. Trump have both authorized the 50-year service pin for Vietnam. We have pinning ceremonies for our Vietnam vets. It's often the first time they've gotten a recognition from the federal government from their service, which is obviously a justice, righting an injustice that they faced so many years ago. So there's multiple tiers, is the point, to multiple strategies to help with this support network for our veterans. And this is one very important step because it's the most direct, with having mental health counselors on staff, with expanding the telehealth, with expanding service animals, with providing for a pipeline of new mental health counselors. So I'm hopeful this is going to bend the curve. It's going to save lives, and we'll be watching closely over the next couple of years. And I have a feeling that a lot of our veteran service groups will be doing the same thing.
Well, Congressman, you're correct. We need to do everything we can, and it's going to take a plethora of ideas and initiatives to make this happen. And the veteran suicide rate is just, people don't understand why it's so high. It is usually something that it's difficult to explain to somebody who hasn't been there. You lose your identity, you lose your purpose, you come home to a new set of friends, a new environment, and a new way of thinking and doing things. And it really is a challenge for veterans to come home from a world of combat or just even being in the military. So we appreciate all the work you're doing. Why don't we go ahead and wrap this up with you telling us just maybe a few of the things that you're currently looking to do with some of your fellow congressmen and women to continue the effort to benefit veterans.
Well, we talked about our crusade to get the offices back. That's a key part of it. We are right now in kind of the end negotiations on the National Defense Authorization Act in the lame duck Congress. We're real close. It comes with another troop raise, which is really important. We have also family leave in there. So many servicemen and women, particularly servicemen, had the experience of not being able to go back when their spouse was giving birth. And we're going to be providing rights for that, particularly because we understand that keeping the family unit cohesive when there's long times away from each other, moments like that is really important for a newborn child, for the combat soldier, and for the spouse. So that'll be another aspect of it. We are working on how we're going to deal with the namings of bases. That's one of the ones that's being hotly debated right now, of course, but that one looks like it's going to come in for a landing. The last thing we are debating right now, and this is budgetary, is there have been increased costs in veterans care as a result of COVID and other manners of about $10 billion this year. And so there's a debate over whether to characterize that as emergency funds or as an increase in general funds. And the debate has to do with that would lift up the amount of money being spent on defense spending. And so that would put a cap on any increases on non-defense spending. So you have a debate over that, not spending the money, which we already have spent, but on how to characterize it for purposes of certain budget restrictions we have. So that's the last big debate of the year. But what isn't a debate is that we're going to care for our veterans and provide the resources we need. How we characterize that for budget points of view, well, that's the Congress, right? You're going to have some debates over fiscal responsibility and over where to adjust budgets. That's part of the mores being debated right now. But overall, we're really pleased about our local VA. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. I have the honor of representing Florida's 9th Congressional District. I mentioned briefly already, we have the Orlando VA in there, one of the nicest VA hospitals in the country. It's brand new. It's serves hundreds of thousands of veterans. We have a lot of veterans who come down for the wintertime from the north. And so we get folks from all over the country. I have members of Congress saying, hey, I have a veteran constituent. Would you mind helping them out? So that happens all the time, but it's really a joy and an honor to have one of the nicest, most advanced top VAs in the nation in Lake Nona, in the district that serves so many veterans, not only in Central Florida, but around the country as they come to our area. So we'll continue to work together to keep as high a quality level of care in all areas of the warfighter when they become a veteran and retire from service. And that's a commitment that Congress needs to continue to keep for the life of the Republic.
So with that, Congressman, I greatly appreciate your time, and I appreciate all you're doing for us and for veterans specifically.
It's my honor. It was great to be able to serve with you in the Florida legislature, and looking forward to continuing with future conversations for support of our veterans here in Florida and across the nation.